This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. A lot has gone on in a bye week. One of the more interesting bye weeks we've had in a while here, Cam. What has your general vibe been from this week? I mean, we know the vibe has been confusing with Four and his whole situation, but outside of the whole Deshaun Watson shoulder fiasco, what have you been picking up from this team that might be missed because everybody's so focused on that shoulder?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of guys just trying to focus on anything other than that chaos. And it gets hard to do when that's every question. And, and to be fair, all of those are the big questions. It's what Deshaun Watson is going through, what this looks like moving forward, because it's been so chaotic that you look for answers in any place you can get them. So it's no one's fault. You have to ask those questions, and this is, but I think for the players, it's trying to find a focus that isn't that, because it doesn't have any impact to them. They have to go out there, receivers have to go out there and catch who's ever passes, whether it's Deshaun, whether it's PJ Walker, whether it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They have to do their job no matter who's under center. Defensively, they have to play strong and maybe even a little stronger depending on who the quarterback is. So I think that's kind of the vibe, is other players trying to navigate how to not have to talk about all of this and not have to focus on this, because they have a job to do at the end of the day. So it is a little weird. The locker room's not weird in the sense of the players or anything like that. I think it's a pretty typical week. Everyone's just doing their thing. But what's atypical is just kind of the navigation that they're having to go through to kind of keep the focus on the game. And so far, I don't think there's not been an issue with players. I think there's a lot of focus and there's a lot of attention, because this is not an easy task at hand. Every game leading up to this was all right, this is what we're good at. This is why we can beat them. Now it's convincing other people, it's the 49ers. They haven't lost a game and they're good on both sides of the ball. So how are they going to approach that? And so that to me is what the vibes are. Just navigation and keeping the focus on San Fran, which is not always easy, but something that they have to do, because that's the task at hand, no matter if it's Deshaun or not.
So what are the things that, hey, no matter who plays quarterback, they got to be protected? And that's not been as consistent as it's been in years past with this offensive line, even though some of these names are very familiar. What do you feel like the sense is in that from the coaching staff and Andrew Berry, whenever you've heard him talk about where that offensive line is and if the solutions for this offensive line are on this roster?
I think that there's always an effort. I will say that is something that this team should be credited for, is Andrew Berry, the front office. They're very aggressive and very consistent in always looking at different options and finding things that make sense for not only this year, but the needs of next year too. They're not going to go out and spend a ton of money on a guy and that impacts their salary cap and their plans to roll over and address that cap next year. They're very good financially at restructuring contracts, of finding guys and hidden gems. And I think that is where they're focused on. They've done a good job of that so far. I think that's where they're at now. Again, is they are exploring different avenues and different positions, of course, but on that offensive line in particular, that's something that they know that there could be talent outside of this roster that they have potential to go out and get. And right now, nobody is satisfied, Jedrick Wills included, with Jed's play, right? Andrew Berry said that in his bye-week press conference. Jed knows he has to play better. We know he'll play better. We know he can play better. And that's something that he wants to do as well. But can you leave that up to chance? Can you wait for that? that's something I don't know that the Browns would be comfortable in, no matter who it was. If someone's playing poorly, do you address that? I think they do look at that. So there's talent throughout the roster, but that is such an important piece of this team. And for the past few years, right, it's been the strength of the Browns, that offensive line being elite. That's all anyone talked about. And they have most of the same talent. They have most of the same players. But when you have things that are popping up too, like Joel Bitonio is on crutches this week and he's dealing with the knee injuries day to day, but he's a integral piece of that line. So if you start to kind of dwindle that was starting, then I think that's when it becomes like, oh, we've got to figure this out. Now, whether it's going out and getting a starter to replace somebody or to step in and kind of boost it, or if it's just going out and finding reliable depth that you can turn to if things aren't going well. I think that's something that the Browns are very aware of, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's something that they do relatively soon, is to bring in some more talent, but not just to replace a guy who isn't performing the way that they need him to, but to address that depth, because you've seen what happens when guys go in and out. Ethan Posick is out multiple times in a game, and then you go to Nick Harris, who Nick Harris can play well, but does he play often? He's had injury problems of his own where he hasn't had those reps. He hasn't had that experience. So you start to get into a realm of, you don't want to go in too far into your depth, and then you're scrambling and you got a bunch of rookies and a bunch of practice squad guys who don't have a ton of experience, because the second that happens and your protection starts to drop, your offense, whether or not it's performing the way that it should in the moment, is taking a hit no matter who's there. Especially when you start to, you got the questions of Deshaun, right? Like if Deshaun's not under center and you're going on PJ Walker, who's new to this offense, if that was the scenario and you're not protecting him, who's learning, same thing you saw it happen with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, where they said, Joel Bitonio said after the game, we didn't block him well enough. We didn't do a good enough job blocking him. He wasn't protected. He had made decisions on his own, some bad decisions of his own, of course, but he took some bad hits. And so to do that to another player, if Deshaun can't go, to PJ Walker, who's new to this offense, is going to be learning things and kind of trying to find his own in this offense, veteran or not, I think you can't continue that path. And even moving forward with Deshaun, you don't want an offensive line that can't protect well and doesn't have the depth that if somebody goes down or somebody's not performing well, that you can't call on somebody. They've had a really good history of depth. The offensive line guys, you would go to guys like Yelda Froholt when he was here, and Michael Dunn does a really good job. Like there wasn't a lot of drop off. There was some, but not a lot. And you're getting into the territory in which you don't have that depth. So when things go wrong and people get hurt and people go down, you see the manifestation of what that looks like. Like it's manifesting into bad offensive play because your offensive line can't protect. So yeah, I think that that's something that the Browns will certainly be looking at. They already, I'm sure, are. And I would expect some things to maybe move around. It wouldn't surprise me if it did, if there were some additions to that line.
And I think when we hear about additions, we all go like, oh, they're going to get Garrett Bowles or like this starter. And I think people have to keep in mind, Jed has a 5th-year option, which means if you want to replace Jed, realistically, you're looking at, again, it's like the running back, right? I like this guy in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, or maybe I like this guy in the 2nd round. He got taken right before we could take him, but he's sitting on somebody's roster, isn't really playing. So we'll sneak and get somebody's young backup and see if that guy can slide in and be somebody who could take over for Jed. It's going to be more along those lines, because I don't want people to get all hyped up. We're going to get Garrett Bowles. If they do, there'll be questions about how responsible that will be in the long run. But like, yeah, people will be through the moon, at least for the immediate circumstance. But it might not be the greatest thing long term. Then they have to think long term, because this Deshaun contract's not going anywhere. None of these contracts, the Jack Conklin contract's not going anywhere anytime soon, right? So you have to figure out a way to be like, hey, it's one thing if we can replace Jack Conklin with DeJuan Jones, because hey, we're just paying for right tackle play anyways, right? With Jed Wills, it's kind of a similar thought process, I think, where it's like, hey, we're already paying for a left tackle, whether that guy starts or not. It doesn't matter, but we can't double pay. We can't pay for 6 offensive linemen. We have to be paying for 5 offensive linemen. And that's where it's going to be, people might be underwhelmed when they hear, some guy from Wisconsin that they've not heard of in like 2 years. And like, that's who the Browns trade for. But I think that's along the lines of where they're aiming at for this left tackle thing, because that's what they can do right now. 2 years ago, when they didn't have any cap concerns, they didn't have a quarterback under contract, they could do something wild like sign or trade for Garrett Bowles. They don't live in that world anymore. So they have to be a little bit more economical, and who knows, it might work out better for you in the long run if you get somebody who's young, turns out to be a good enough left tackle. Now you don't have to draft one. Now you can keep him long term, and it might end up being a better situation for you. But it's not going to be the one that's going to get you immediately excited.
And that's the thing with the Browns, though, is they've done this, right? Where they've gotten a guy and fans are like, oh, okay. Obo Okoronkwo is who screams out to me as that. He was a player that fans were like, oh, okay. Like, is that enough depth for you? Is that like he wasn't like a massive star? Is he going to be able to have another productive year? And here he is, impressing by far. He is exactly what this defense needed. He was a piece that was a quiet addition to the roster, but has been explosive. He has given a boost to speed and his ability to, get off on it just in any different area. And the way that his game is kind of so versatile provides this big boost to the defensive line in a way that helps Miles, it helps Z, and they love having Obo. He's been a huge star for them, but he wasn't a signing that Browns fans, I think, were like super stoked about. They were just kind of like, okay, it's a quiet guy, like a quiet addition. And it was like, we'll see what happens. And he's been a huge piece of this defensive line looking the way it has. So I think that the same kind of signing is like, or like trade, that's kind of what I expect for most of the moves, whether it's offensive line or elsewhere, anything on the roster, any kind of addition like that. It's not going to, for the most part, it's not going to be some big name guy that everyone's like super excited about that they have to pay a ton of money to, or like give up a bunch of stuff, because they don't have a lot of trade assets. Like at the end of the day, that they're working with what they've got, but they do a good job of it. So fans should, I think, temper expectations for the name or the size of the signing and be patient with how it could play out and how it could fit into the team, because they have done a good job. You can't deny that they've done a good job of those secret little gems, finding those gems. And we've seen it before, and I think we'll see it again if they do make some additions to this roster. And
when you look at the history of left tackle moves, you genuinely don't want the guy right? Because that guy rarely works out for you, right? Especially if it's not in free agency, if it's like in a trade or something, because teams don't trade these guys. Like left tackles will stay for one team forever, because you don't have to worry about them going somewhere else in free agency. You can just pay them at the regular rate. Like they're just really easy things to hang on to, and they're not the easiest to find. So when you're trying to trade for a left tackle in the middle of the season, you're not getting, Trent Williams. You're getting, maybe you're buying something that's a little bit better than Jed Woods, or you're trading for something that's a little bit better than Jed Wills, not Woods, Wills. But PTSD. Yeah, you're trading for something a little bit better than Jed Wills, but for way more of a price than what you feel like Jed Wills replacing him is worth, because you're panicking, making a quick decision. You want something that's going to make the fans happy. A lot of the left tackle moves that work out are the ones that's like nobody cares about when they happen, right? The ones that happen, like if you go out and get a Lael Collins, people are going to be all excited about that. But there's a reason Cincinnati decided we'd rather go with Jonah Williams, given all the problems that we know he's had on the left side, and switching to right, than to keep you. Like, that's not the best sign in the world for this guy still being a productive player. And I think we fall into this trap with just players in general, where we're like, hey, the name value, Zeke Elliott. Zeke ain't done nothing for the Patriots since he signed there. But like Zeke Elliott or these guys, it feels really cool. You could buy the jersey, you could plug them in on Madden, and you go, wow, we got Zeke Elliott. And then he plays and you like, he don't look like Zeke Elliott no more because that's why he's available. And I think sometimes we get married to these big names, especially on the offensive line. I think this is especially true. The big names that are available, those aren't the guys that you really want to go after. So you got to find a way to try to be smart about this. And how can you be smart? I see something in this guy that hasn't played that maybe they don't see. Or I could put him in this system, do this with him. I think he'll be all right here, right? You see the Eagles have done this multiple times. A lot of teams have done this where it's like, hey, you don't like this guy? Okay, we'll take him, and we'll plug them in, make them do these things, and we feel like that can be the problem. Right now, they're just looking for somebody who doesn't get beat inside immediately and can anchor, right? They don't need the greatest left tackle in the world. They just need somebody who can close the faucet on the inside and drop an anchor a little bit. And I feel like they'd be like, I can live with that. Those are problems. The other problems, we can live with that. Run the arc, I can live with that. All that stuff. But when it's the number of issues that Jed has been getting beat with, that's been a concern. It's too sporadic.
Yes.
And I think that's why they're going to look for, guys not at the edge of rosters, but guys who are comfortably number twos, you know what I mean? And they might have to offer something for those guys. But I think that's where they're going to look at guys on the rookie deal. So that's where I would have my targets aimed at if I were somebody who's trying to predict this. Interesting bye week going on, Cam. Always great to have you on. Thank you for coming on. Make sure you check out Cam's stuff on her Twitter and the Next Man Up series that she does. She just did one with DeJuan Jones. Tons of great articles, tons of good footage from practice, everything. So make sure y'all check it out. Cam, anything you want to say before we head out?
You guys are going to love the next Man Up. You guys are going to love it. Some fun stuff from a different side of the ball than we've talked to anybody. Yeah. Good.
I have a good guess, but I'm not going to spoil it. Y'all have a great day. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.